Carlton King is a former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy podcast, the show which shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, but actually majors on geopolitics. And what that really is in today's world is how the world functions. And indeed, the people who make the world function. You know, sometimes we have this vision that the people who make that world function are actually politicians. Sometimes we even give that element to the military. But, you know, the more I do the show and the more I look around in the world, and indeed, to be fair, throughout all of my time in the various services I've been in, it was became clear to me that the people who actually make the world function, particularly now we've only got one system called capitalism, are the people who control the money. The people who decide who gets what, when, where, and what we see as the way forward, understanding that monetary process. Now, I had a man on some time ago, a great guy, a billionaire fella, a man who's made his way all the way to the top, a man who came out of a very poor, and please, you should go back and listen to his original podcast, who made his way from a very, very poor original circumstance all the way through to being an individual who has actually some levy on how the world functions. That man is Ron Bienvenu. Good day to you, Ron.
King, good to be back.
Great stuff. Nice to hear you. If there's a bit of a lag, listeners understand that I'm presently sitting down in Southern Europe and Ron's sitting all the way across in the good old US of A, down in his homeland state of Louisiana, I believe. Is that right, Ron?
That is correct. I'm here in lovely New Orleans, Louisiana, one of my favorite cities in the world.
Great stuff. Never been. You're going to have to invite me over there, Ron, one of these days. Never been there.
We definitely will. I call it my spirit animal city. I don't do any business here, really, but the art and the food, it's an exquisite city. You're definitely coming to visit.
Super duper. I'll hold you to that, my good friend. So last time you were on the show, we looked at quite a lot of elements. We looked into the politics of the world. We looked into your historical background. We looked into what you thought of history. And we spoke about your book, The Fourth Protocol. Now, I know you were working on the next book, The Fifth Protocol, and you were looking at maybe 2-3 years or something like that, I think you said at the time. However, over the last 6-7 months, the world has moved incredibly fast. And I think some of the things you were talking about doing then are potentially superseded. Have already started. So can you give me your view of where we are in the world and how money, the movement of money, the operation of obtaining wealth, how that has changed as you perceive it right now?
For sure. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's one of my arguments. My daughter just went to university, and she's like, "Pop, do I have to go to the university?" I said, "You don't have to go." I said, but you should experience it. And I said, "But you're going to work your ass off if you don't go." And I said, "But the problem with a university education today is that 100 years ago, you spent 4 years studying something, you'd be pretty good at it. Today, by the time you're done with the fourth year, half the stuff you've learned has been superseded. That's the rate of change that is going on, and it's happening across the board. It makes writing another book very frustrating, because I have these what I consider to be profound ideas, and next thing you know, it's already passé, and I'm like, damn it, I can't. And so yeah. Listen, I think the most fundamental shift that is going to occur and is occurring is this whole data as an asset, the assetization of information, the truly economic emergence of data as a valuable, probably arguably the most valuable commodity on the earth, and the amount of wealth that will be created from the emergence of that is enormous. I think we touched on it last time, and it's having tremendous impacts across the economy, and it's really affecting politics. Is where I'm really fascinated, because it's almost like we have a second era of robber barons, where you have capitalists, and I'm a virulent capitalist, but you'd also have to be a virulent idiot not to understand that what is happening with data, and why the top 5 information technology companies, all based in the U.S., by the way, are worth $7 trillion, and the top 5 oil and gas companies are worth less than $1 trillion. The age of industrial era power is fading. And that's what I believe. And it's causing a serious political problem, in that the poor are always struggling. The rich, in many cases, just want to feel good about themselves, so they pass laws to help the poor, but that the middle class has to pay for. And the middle class is being squeezed. And a lot of that is because of this I would say, unfair distribution of wealth being generated from data. And as a joke, I've been running around the world, Carlton, telling people I'm going to be the Karl Marx of the information age. And my capitalist billionaire friends look at me like, what, are you crazy? And I'm like, no, hear me out. I know it's I say it just to get people rattled, but it's true. During the Industrial Revolution, the robber barons created so much wealth. And a lot of that wealth came from the backs of laborers. So you had the land labor capital model. And Marx simply pointed out that a lot of the wealth is being generated by the labor, but the capitalists keep taking the lion's share, too much. And he had a point. It was an unstable environment, and you had unions, you had communism, you had a lot of disruption based on that idea. And I would argue that it wasn't in the U.S. until Henry Ford figured out that he needed to pay his laborers enough money that they could afford to buy a car, that really kind of found the balance between capitalist excess and labor. And
that's a good point. That's a good point, Ron. Sorry, I'm just breaking you a second, because that's what I was just going to ask you about. Because in the new era that we're looking at, there's a survey that came out about 3 months ago that 1% of the wealthiest people of the world earn more than half, that is 4.5 billion people in the rest of the world. And that 1% is minuscule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, my problem is that cannot be sustained.
No, it's not. And it's the middle that's getting squeezed. Again, the rich feel guilty, so they send money to the poor, and, good intentions and all, but it's the middle class that's getting beat up. And it's worse than that. So the company I run now is Silverback. Our whole thing is the sovereignty of data. Mm-hmm. If you create the data, you should benefit from it. Be you a company, an organization, an individual. If someone uses your DNA in a study, it doesn't get more sovereign than your own DNA. You should get a check. When you run a Google search, if Google's using me to make money, then okay, look, I got it. A free search. I love Google. It's transformed the world. It made the world, frankly, a better place, a more just place, because all the world's information is at anyone's fingertips. It's just about motivation and getting stuff done. I love that. But let's be real. They're if I do a search in Liverpool and in England, that data flows out to California. Then I buy something from Amazon, and that data flows out to Washington, and the local tax base is eroded. because those taxes don't get paid. I didn't buy in the store locally. And my data is being used to create wealth across the pond, and I get nothing for it. And when Google emerged, in their defense, there was no way to do that technically. It was just technologically impossible. But today, the technology exists through blockchain and NFTs and others, where every participant in the world should be, if they use your data, you should be getting a check. And it is the foundation, I believe, of a universal basic income. That imagine this: every child born in the third world, we take their DNA, we put a digital wallet together, we give them an NFT, and that data will be studied over the lifetime of that child, and that could be the foundation, and they should get a check. Every time that data is used, sold, monetized, they should get a check. Same with the search.
So how difficult is the technology involved in that, Ron? How difficult is that to be done? Is it here now in your perspective, or does it need to be worked on in order to make that achievable?
No, I think it's here now. I think blockchain and NFTs are the foundation for it. I think you're going to see a shift in business models. I think Google's business model is not sustainable. It's just unjust. And it's like what Marx said about the laborers. He said, you got to give back to the people who are creating the wealth. Well, the same thing with Google. If you're using me and my data, you have to give me something back. And the technology exists. I'm not saying it's not daunting, but it doesn't require an invention. It just requires an application. So it's here, and that is the future. The middle class, and that's why you have this, in the United States, and the political parties are out of their mind. You got the semi-socialists on the left, and you got the semi-fascists on the right, as Biden called MAGA yesterday. Semi-fascist, well, Biden goes semi-socialist, and they're just tearing this country to pieces. And it's because the middle is getting squeezed, and they're not getting a fair shake. They're creating a lot of the wealth that's flowing to a very few handful of companies and individuals, and they're not getting a fair shake. And that's not sustainable. Politically, it's not sustainable, and I think it's going to accelerate. I think you're going to start to see individuals. So I had a friend the other day say, well, then if you go and tell Google, you got to pay me for my data, Google says, screw you, don't use my search engine. And then he says, you have no power. You're an individual. You have no leverage on Google. And I said, correct. But that's why unions came about. So what if I filed a class action lawsuit against Google saying they are unfairly taking value from everyone on the planet, and that we demand, to be paid? And a class action lawsuit will get their attention. And I might do it. I don't know. Do I want to be that guy? I don't know.
Do you want to be an enemy of Google is a big question.
Yeah. Well, no enemy. I have a lot of respect for them, but they need to change. And look, they'll change. Either competition will come about that will employ this model that I'm talking about, and that will disrupt them. Maybe Microsoft does it with Bing to damage, to compete with Google. I believe in capitalism, but the ideas need to be put out there. And that's why I say the land labor capital market model of economic theory, which evolved alongside of the Industrial Revolution, is broken. It is no longer the three major inputs. The main input is innovation and information, which modern economic theory, classical economic theory, really doesn't do anything with. That's why Malthus is always wrong. He's always wrong. The world's going to end. Alvin Toffler, 1970, Future Shock. The world's going to end. The world's going to end. They've been predicting the end of the world since the world began, and yet it never comes about. And it's because people discount future innovation. They run models out in their minds, if not on spreadsheets, using today's technology to manage tomorrow's problem. And that is never a winning formula. And so it's arrogance. And the joke I tell people all the time is anybody who says they're here to save the planet is misspelling the word. They actually meant enslave. And so that's what I believe. So the global warming people, you got a point. Humans are definitely affecting the environment, and we should be aware of it, and we should be aware of it and mitigate it. But don't think the world's going to end. This scaremongering it discredits science, it discredits the political process, and it's unnecessary. The future is as bright as it's ever been.
But yeah. You just broke for me one second. We'll keep it rolling. What is the answer to the situation though, whereby And this is where the problem gets a little bit sticky. I understand the theory, but the theory doesn't take into account the politics of geopolitics. So the problem lies now with this. You've got the United States, by far the most powerful country in the world for years and years and years. Now, a competitor is there in the name of China, example. Other competitors are coming forward in a collective in the name of the European Union. And so what you've now got, though, is a position that actually says we have now got enemies, perceived enemies, purely and simply because they are a challenge to the hegemony of the United States. So what you might have then is, yes, we can make things function in a certain manner that all the world would work together, but that's not what we're used to. We're used to the leadership of a single power, and that single power, which happens to be your country presently, doesn't want to give it up. And the next single power won't want to give it up, whomever that might be. It once was my country, the United Kingdom. It didn't want to give it up. They never will. What that leads to is warfare 9 times out of 10, right? So if you're looking at it from a purely monetaristic, even, I would argue, even humanitarianistic perspective, yes, I could see your point saying, okay, so you've got a ruling elite, we need to take some from them, give some to the middle, raise up the poor to some extent, because otherwise the poor at some stage will, as it did in Russia, will rise up and say, we're not having it anymore. And you know who will make them rise up? It's never the poor. The poor never rise up by themselves. If you look through, and this was my game, it's always the people from the middle who feel they're not getting a fair crack at the whip, who incite the poor to rise. So this is the problem that we're not solving with just utilizing data, I think. Or do you have an answer for that?
Well, I agree with you, by the way, that it's the middle that matters. Like I said, the rich want to, they don't want to feel like hypocrites, so they want to give away money, other people's money. The poor struggle to do what they can, and the middle gets killed. And I think that's what's happening. And I agree with you. The real change comes from the middle, not from the elites and not from the poor, in my opinion. In general, I mean, there's certainly exceptions to that. But in a democratic environment, it's the middle that has to move. So what do I think? I mean, look, I think this whole data as an asset thing has some really strange implications for nations, for governments. So I can envision, and I don't know if I want to go into it, but I can envision, I think we talked a little bit about it last time, about figuring out how many soybeans are in every silo in the world at any given moment. Yeah. And well, if you can do that and you can monetize that, if you're a farmer in West Africa farming soybeans and you're getting a big ass check every month from a company that's based in the U.S. trading your data, and where over time does your allegiance fall? Do you fall to the government of the country you're in, or is it to the guys, to the company that's paying you? I think you're going to see a corporatization. As I said in the last call, I think political power has been waning really since Rockefeller, since the breakup of Standard Oil. And with the acceleration of information technology and the idea that information technology can be used to spread assets globally as a corporation, whereas countries remain geographically pretty concentrated, that power is shifting from political to economic might. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. But the political system that evolved during the Industrial Revolution, through a lot of pain, if you recall, I mean, there was a lot of disruption, especially, looking at the world wars and, the emergence of oil and gas as a major source of power. And the Japanese and Germans have no oil and gas. And exactly. So it was driving a lot of thinking back then. So the same thing is happening now in the information age. You have, we're not going to predict that history is going to repeat itself, but in the 1800s, you had the rise of the robber barons and the most wealth ever created in the history of the human race. It was not being distributed very fairly, at least in many people's opinion, and that caused a lot of problems, but it also lifted billions of people out of poverty, and there's a lot that happened there. But then once you established industrial might, first on coal, then on oil and gas, then countries that lacked industrial might had to find it. And that often leads to conflict and war. And so I think the same thing's happening here, is that you've got the robber barons taking so much wealth out of the world and not treating the people who are helping them create that wealth fairly. That's going to be a political movement. Once that political movement, and it's also going to be an economic and accounting movement. As I said last time, the accounting industry is broken. They don't know how to value information assets. They emerged, the accounting standards around the world emerged alongside of the Industrial Revolution. They're very good at that. But as I posited earlier, land, labor, and capital is broken. You need an entire accounting regime just on information assets, and it does not exist. And our securities laws were written in the U.S. in 1933 and 1934. Are those adequate for managing cryptocurrency assets? And you said something earlier, Carlton, that I say all the time. The problem I have with the U.S. is it has the least incentive to change. It's at the top of the heap. And it's very reactive, and they don't want to change. But so Gensler, the SEC chair, wrote this big article in the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago. And he's talking about how the securities laws are just fine, that, fraud is fraud. And yeah, that's all fine. So basically he wrote a big old long article basically saying fraud is wrong. Yeah, but you haven't addressed cryptocurrency. You haven't addressed the fact that it's not a security, it's not a currency, it's something, it can be many things. And what he has done is basically cut the feet to fit the shoes. Rather than make a new pair of shoes, he's like, no, we're going to stuff, modern technology and innovation into a box that was built in 1934. It's ridiculous, and it's lazy, but it's hard. And so I think you're right that if we don't use the political system, democracy, to reorient the massive amounts of wealth that are being created, you're going to have problems. And even if you reorient it, you still might have problems, because the have-nots may not want to live as a have-not forever. The beauty is, though, Carlton, we can share wealth today. A person in England, a person in Bangladesh, a person in Pakistan doing a search can get a check. I'm talking about a universal basic income based on human behavior. Mm-hmm. And not government handouts, not extortion, not government taking from Peter to pay Paul, but from people going about their lives, creating value through their behavior, which allows the entire global supply chain to readjust and be more efficient, and thereby create more wealth. And so we should share that globally.
You see, the thing that I have, I see the picture, I see it all, and you're absolutely right, actually, that corporate power is, I believe, already now greater than political power. Mm-hmm. The truth of the matter is that the United States president functions at the behest of corporate United States. That's the truth of the matter, and that's been forever and a day, to be fair, right? So with that being the case, and with corporations knowing more and more and more and more about individuals, and I put Facebook as Meta, as it is now, as a primary element within that. I put Amazon as a primary element within that. I put Google, as you rightly say, as a primary element. They know your searches, so they understand what you are thinking. Right. So once you have that, they can control who becomes a politician. Mm-hmm. Right. This is the point. They can say, you know what, do you want to be the president or do you not? Because if you don't, yeah, fair enough. Try and bring the law in that changes our hegemony as Google. If you do want to be the president, keep your mouth shut and you'll be all right, and we'll let you in, because they know everything. These are private companies.
Yeah, and Carlton, this is exactly the model of Standard Oil. That Roosevelt said Standard Oil has too much power. It is corrupting the political realm because economically it's dominating. They were producing 25% of gross domestic product in the United States, as we said last time. But it was the political problem. It was that Standard Oil was picking and choosing presidents, and Roosevelt, put his foot down. But you have the same situation, and until the middle rise up, and this is why you have Trump and Boris Johnson, and because they're a symptom of the frustration of the middle class. And I find it very insulting when the president of the United States calls half the country fascist. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's just willful ignorance about the real problems the middle class is facing.
No, I think it's just politics, Ron. I don't think it's ignorance. I think it's politics. There's a big difference because he knows what the situation is, but listen, the right always find it easier to play what was the Nazi Party? The Nazi Party, if you put it in the German, the NSDAP, which is a National Socialist German Workers' Party, right? Basically, they knew what they needed to give German workers. So they said, you want communism, we'll give you communism, but communism in one state. Mm-hmm. Okay? So basically, we'll have communism. Now, the problem was that some of Hitler's people who actually formed the party with him, Ernst Röhm, Strasser, who was a Brown Hemden, they believed in properly going down the route of communism in one state, Nazism. Right? Hitler didn't. He did the deal with the same people you're talking about, the robber barons. He did the deal with the press czars. He did the deal with the present government. And basically, in the night of the long knives, they got rid of the true believers. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fascist by any means. I'm probably more a communist, but if I was going to be anything. But again, you've got a problem with communism. Look at China's done extremely well, brought 800 million of its people out of absolute poverty, right? But it's not communism. Yeah. It's basically state nationalism, state capitalism, if I want a better word. Because what they're basically doing is they're running a social system as potentially communist, but actually the economy is totally capitalist. And you saw that with Russia. When Russia came out of communism, what it did is it went to uber capitalism. Right? And basically 10 blokes, in fact 12, ended up running the whole of the country. All that Putin's done is try and grab back from the 12 all the country's wealth. So this is the problem you have with companies deciding what they do and how they do it. And I'm just wondering how we control those powerful individuals who say, I'm a company, I'm a corporation, and I want to run it my way. How do you mitigate that slightly? Because let's face it, in the 2008 crash, those companies crashed, and it was the people and the government which brought them out of it. You know, if it was true capitalism, they'd have just fallen by the wayside. Every bank in the United States would have been finished. You know, General Motors would have been finished. Ford would have been finished, right? But the state supported them. That's not proper capitalism. So how do we deal with that, Ron? How do we deal with that perspective?
It's a tough one, man. I mean, again, those corporations, and unlike Standard Oil, which was primarily focused in the United States, it had global operations, but they were a small percentage because it was hard to run an oil rig out in the Sea of Tonkin there from New York. But today you could do it with no problem. So we're facing an unprecedented disruption of the balance of power between political power, which is elected officials in the West, the democracy, and people voicing their opinions. But now you can only voice your opinion in a country, but the companies that you're trying to deal with are global in nature. And I don't have a political answer for you, but there's going to need to be one at some point. And I am just not creative enough or smart enough to figure that out today. But so I don't know. I mean, it is a truly global challenge, and it will continue. And if the United States is not willing to lead on the restructuring of the information technology industry, at the very least, my narrow focus is on, at the very least, the sovereignty of data should be recognized on a global basis. That my data is mine, and anybody who uses it pays me. And the U.S. government could start an NFT program for all citizens, or the GDPR. The Europeans could do it. And
see, I don't think they will, Ron. I think you'll do it. And this is what I'm saying. No, I'm being serious. I'm being totally and utterly serious. This is what I'm saying. I think that the economic and governmental systems that surround it are too encased in what they've got. Right? And the system that controls them encases them in what they've got. So what it takes is people like you to run that and say, okay, data is a new asset, I'll run with it. You will then change their minds and they'll say, oh yeah, this Ron Bienvenu fella, he's come out with this data, and I can see that we can make money out of it by basically charging people for the monies they get back from Ron. So they'll do that. That's not a problem. But you'll control it, Ron. So the question is, what stops you then from being totally corrupted?
Do
you see what I'm saying? Because I think you will make it happen. But I think the problem is
Silverback is definitely, that's our mission.
Yeah.
That's our mission statement.
I think the problem is what the governments do.
Yeah.
You know, because we're depending on you then to be basically egalitarian and benevolent. Yeah, that's basically, it's true. That's what we're depending on.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that.
Do you see what I mean, though, Ron? Because the government won't do it. Because it can't think quick enough. It can't. It's like an oil tanker. It can't turn quick enough. It's not agile. You are agile. That's the big difference.
Yeah, no, I think I appreciate that, and I also understand, and I make jokes, because it's just such a big idea. It's hard to even think in terms of like my little company could implement that kind of thing on a global basis, but we're trying, and we hope to do that. But the responsibility is staggering as well. And but I agree with you. A frontal assault on the economic, political, industry is never going to work. You're going to have to flank them, and you're going to. I think where I'm hoping to start is, again, a digital bill of rights, a digital manifesto, if I want to, walk in Marxist shoes, where it starts as a movement and demands from information technology companies that they treat us more fairly. And, I'm not a politician. I've had too much fun to be a politician. And I still have fun. So, But you're hitting on it. I started thinking about this in 2004. I was in Costa Rica for a couple of months on my honeymoon, and I got to thinking, like, I'm looking around Costa Rica, and I was thinking, Costa Rica has no military. It's a beautiful country. The people are so lovely. There's 4 million people there. It's gorgeous. It's got this big, volcano right in the middle of the country. It's crazy. And I was thinking, I was thinking about this idea in 2004 that businesses were spreading globally, and how can democracy check global expansion of economic power with politics? And I thought, my silly thought as an American, typical American, I'm like, why don't we just annex Costa Rica? Because historically, I thought about this. Historically,
that was done, of course. The banana republic.
Yeah, well, a country has to be contiguous. The whole point of a country is to defend the borders and to keep integrity. But in today's world, that's not the case. Modern militaries can be anywhere whenever they need to be. So, and when I said annex Costa Rica, what I thought, my crazy idea at the time was every 10 years, the United States could offer a democracy to join the United States as a state or a group of states and expand. And so you think about, again, I was just crazy American at the time, but think about it. You're leveraging the court system, the legal system, the educational system, the financial system. So you're just adding people. So like Costa Rica doesn't need its own currency. Costa Rica doesn't need its own military. Costa Rica doesn't need a lot of things. So you can get efficiency of democracy, get efficiency of economics because you're spreading infrastructure over a larger pie, but you also allow for political power to offset economic power in some ways. That was my fantasy. I could never figure it out, and it's crazy thinking of a crazy man. But something has to happen. Because I'm telling you, it is inevitable. I have this kind of idea that I call it historical inevitability. What we're talking about is inevitable, that information technology companies will continue to dominate markets, and they will use their power globally to continue to expand their wealth, which, again, that's the capitalist urge. It's natural. Look at Apple. I mean, they're sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars of cash. It's crazy. And they have to grow. This is the problem with Wall Street.
Expand or die, that's Ford, isn't it?
Say again?
Expand or die, that's what Ford said, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Wall Street has that too. The joke I make, Carlton, I'm like I said, 5'4" on a good day. And I always start meetings with, on Wall Street, if you ain't growing, you ain't worth shit. And well, as a guy who stopped growing in the 5th grade, I don't appreciate that. And so, so there's a lot of value in profits. But yeah, I mean, you have the capitalist imperative, grow or die. You have these giant companies that have really unassailable positions currently. I'm not saying that, competition won't emerge, and I think it will. But the old military saying is the bullet you don't hear that kills you. Mm-hmm. So it's the one you don't see coming. And, maybe what Silverback's doing or other companies like us who are really trying to I don't know how to say it. I mean, make it more fair, distribute the wealth more fairly through data sovereignty. I think that's a movement that hopefully will catch fire, and I'm glad to be part of it, and I'm excited about it. But it's going to be bigger than that. You bring up the right question. Okay, fine. We might be able to spread the wealth around a little better, but again, it's what I said about the farmer in West Africa. If as a citizen, Google sending me a check every month for, $10,000, and Google says, how much allegiance do I owe Google versus my national or state government? I don't know. And these companies are global in nature, and I don't know how you check that power politically without some horrible idea of, a global government that is, I'm not a big fan of that. It scares me, but I don't know what an alternative is.
Well, I think the alternative is global corporate governance, which, to my mind, is worse. Unless you get the right people. It's all about the right people.
Yeah.
But my right people might not be your right people. That's where the problem lies.
Of course, I always say, what's good for a house cat is not good for a lion, and vice versa.
Exactly. You see, Pol Pot. Remember Pol Pot in the Killing Fields? Remember?
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah, Pol Pot in the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. What he did was he was a bright fella, communist, believed in perpetual revolution, which is part of the communist understanding of how the world functions, which is actually quite correct. What they say is you create a new class, a new ruling elite, every time you allow elite to come to the fore. So the only way to prevent that, under Marxist theory, is to have what's known as perpetual revolution, right? In which you keep having revolutions which stop the class, the new mercantile, the new ruling elite from rising to the top. Now, Pol Pot, being a son of somebody that was relatively, he was in the Cambodia run by the French at the time. And so in France, the way the French ran their colonies, they weren't just colonies, they were parts of France. So, of course, he went then to be educated in parts of Paris and understood how it worked, and he wore glasses. So he realized in his mind that anybody who wore glasses must be of the ruling elite because, of course, they can afford a pair of glasses and they understand how they function. So therefore, let's get. The only reason I say this is Pol Pot never got rid of himself, though, did he? Yeah. And that's where the problem lies. You see it for other people, but you're not looking after. But you're not seeing it for yourself, and that's how things get corrupted. Even if you start off with the best ideas in the world, it gets corrupted because you want to put your ideas on someone else. Now, I believe in the idea of data. I believe in it, absolutely. I believe in Silverback's perspective on that. Indeed, you should actually explain to the people what your perspective is on that, because I think it's quite interesting. Yeah, could you just do that for 5 minutes?
Sure. In your perpetual revolution idea, it reminded me of the quote by Thomas Jefferson: "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." I think he had a similar idea.
But not his blood.
Yeah, not his blood. Again, the last conversation I had to laugh, the whole Lard Farquaad thing. Many of you will die, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. And that's always the Pol Pots of the world. From a Silverback perspective, again, it's a very simple concept. Whoever creates the data should benefit from its monetization in some capacity. I'm willing to pay Google a percentage of whatever they can generate for me, because I can't go out and market my data like Google can. So I'm not suggesting that Google doesn't have a value, but there just needs to be a balance, and a competitive balance would be nice, where Google will pay me X percent of a transaction using my data, and Microsoft will pay me Y, and Silverback will pay me Z. And, I hope that, and I believe that competition is inevitable in this field, and it will transform the landscape. But truly, the hegemons, as you say, the information hegemons have an advantage, but that's not definitive. So silverback is simple. Whoever or whatever creates the data, they should participate in the monetization of that data, be that an individual using their DNA data. Like, I think 23andMe is a damn near a criminal organization. And my lawyers listened to this call last time, and they said, could you not say that and get us all sued? So I'm not saying they're a criminal organization.
You did say they were brilliant, though. You did say they were brilliant.
Yeah.
I love that.
My lawyer literally said that to me. He's like, dude, could you not say shit like that? And so but I think they need to be more just. And I think they have the capacity to do it, and they have the technology to do it. And I think in the long run, it would serve their business interest. I think they would get more participation, and they would get better data, and they would be doing better for the world. I'm not saying using that DNA data to solve cancer isn't a great thing, but you can't cut the people out who provided the DNA. And yeah, they signed it away. You're going to say, oh, legally they signed it away. I understand that, but they didn't know what they were signing. They didn't understand. You understood, and you went out and intentionally got them to send you money, which is even funnier. And and it's going to change. I think I mentioned last time, we have an investment in a company that it's a private company, so I'm not going to mention it, but they have DNA from third world countries, and we're pushing hard to create these NFTs and digital wallets for anybody whose DNA we use, so that way they can participate. So competition will come. And,
so what you're saying is when you get the company, so I'm just trying to make it clear in my mind and the viewers' minds. When you get the company, you bring individuals' data into it, they already have an agreement, in a sense, with you that says, right, however we monetize your individual data, you obtain, I don't know, 10%, 5%, whatever it might be, of that. Is that the process?
Yeah, it could be a micropayment. It's not just individuals. We at Silverback, we tend to focus more on businesses.
Okay.
That businesses are creating information within their supply chain, and they're not leveraging that, and they're not getting any compensation for that. So if I'm a trucking company and I'm sending my trucking company data to an insurance company, the insurance company is using that data to make money. And Absolutely. You're a sovereign. You should get a piece of that. If you're a farmer and you're sending your data to somebody on production, and they're using that to create carbon credit offsets or trade commodities, again, you should benefit from that. You should participate in that. And that's the equality we're trying to bring to the global economy at Silverback, is the sovereignty of data, and let everybody participate. And again, 20 years ago, you couldn't do this technically. It would have been nightmarish. It was impossible. But today, the technology is there, and it's not trivial, but it's not impossible. And it's going to, and you're going to see the creation of wealth when the accounting industry finally catches up, which is probably still a ways away. And they can start putting value on data. And the first thing Silverback is doing is we're building we call it DICE, Data Ingestion Capitalization Engine. And
sorry, what is that again, Ron? Data ingestion
capitalization engine. Okay. And the idea is any business, any individual, any consumer can put data into our system, and we will value that data today and into the future. And so you can have an asset that you can use. So the company I was just talking about, who I can't mention, unfortunately, not yet, they haven't gone public yet.
Okay.
But we did, as part of my investment, our investment, Silverback's investment into that company, we said we'll invest, but we want to do a data valuation. And they have very valuable data. And we value the data between 300 million and 1.6 billion. And depending on how much, and it's quite sophisticated.
But how much would this is just to get the sphere of it? How much would a normal everyday accounting firm value the product at? Use between three. How much would that? What would the differential be? Is what I'm trying to find out.
So they would probably value it a lot less than we would. And this is the example I give, Carlton. Do you ever think about your blood? You have blood right now.
Yeah, right. You don't think about it. Absolutely
Yeah,
right.
let's just pouring out. I don't know if we talked about this last time. I don't want to repeat ourselves, but unless it's pouring out of you, you don't care about your blood. Well, data is the lifeblood of a business. And when the accountants say, well, data is not worth anything, there's no asset value. Okay, take the data out. Now what do you got? You got a corpse. And so at the very least, the replacement value of data is essential. And so, but the accountants don't even do that. So what we do is we'll put together our valuation, and we do this all the time. And then we'll go to their accountants. So in this case, that company's accountants, and they say, oh, that data's not worth $1 billion. Okay, what's it worth? Is it worth zero? No. Okay, well, what is it worth? How much you want to put on it? And they guess. They don't even have a model to figure it out. You know the old joke, oh, would you have sex with me for $1? No. Would you have sex with me for $1 million? Maybe. Well, now that we know what you are, let's negotiate price. And so the accountants are the same. And so they don't really have a model. It's not. I mean, there's no FASB standards. There's no GAP standards. There's no GAT standards. And so it'll emerge, but it's very hard because unlike a physical asset, like a barrel of oil, there's a utility for a barrel of oil. There's also a finite end of a barrel of oil. It gets consumed. Yep. But data is this odd thing that the more you have, the more valuable it can become. And the time frame under which you want to value the data, an example I might have gave last time, but if a bullet's moving in your direction, that's a very valuable piece of information for a very short period of time. But once the bullet's past you, that data is marginally valuable. Well, a lot of information in the global economy works that way. For some people, instant knowledge is worth a fortune, trader. Mm-hmm. And for some people, longitudinal studies about the impact of certain things, epigenetic expression in the DNA world, over the lifetime of a person is extremely valuable. And so, but over long periods of time. So when if you're an accountant, how do you address that? You say, oh, okay. Well, here's some data. What's the value of it? To who, over what time frame? And unlike a barrel of oil, data has a derivative property to it, meaning you can sell the same thing over and over and over again, and it doesn't destroy itself. So I've actually been playing with this idea of good and evil, and my idea is good is anything that when you have it, you want more of it, and evil or bad is anything you have you want less of it. So traffic, bad. Love, good. And so data is this strange thing in the accounting world. It just builds value on itself. Yeah. And it has a network effect, a natural network effect that just upends traditional land, labor, capital models of value. And like I said, I don't have the answers. I'd rather ask the questions. The answers seem a little hard. The questions are fun, though. And so, but you ask, the big questions, and it is in keeping with your show's, value and depth, that all this economic change and, us running around with our sovereignty idea and just the globalization of the economy, the pressure on the political side is immense. And they have a very hard time, first of all, figuring it out and then doing something about it. Even if you have the right answer, how are you going to change things if you're in France? What do you unplug yourself from the internet? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the French could do to affect. They try. Of course, the Europeans sue everybody all the time, but it's a start. But I don't have the answers, man. I don't have the answers. But I tell you where I think the answers are going to come from.
Please.
Yeah. So I've been spending a lot of time in Miami, and I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but Miami. I'm not a Miami person. I'm not a partier. I don't go out all night. I've always seen Miami as this, drug-fueled party all the time with cheesy clothes and tacky cars and trying to Miami Vice. Yeah. It's just not my world, man. And so, but I've been, I live there and I have for a while, but I spent as little time historically as I had to there. But lately it's been the opposite, because the joke I tell people is, Wall Street in the 80s, remember Michael Milken, you had a new asset class emerge, junk bonds, and it upended the global economy. I mean, it started in America, but it rippled across the world because Milken and his boys said there's an asset sitting in plain sight that you can leverage the shit out of, and we can do leverage buyouts and transform America's economy. They did. So I say the Wall Street of the 80s And the Silicon Valley of the 90s had a baby, and it's Miami. All the money.
You think the same sort of thing's going on in Miami? What,
dude?
Is that in crypto? What is it in? What are they doing it in?
It's across the board, but yeah, it's a lot of crypto. You know, Miami's become a real mecca for cryptocurrency. Now, I'll give you a perfect. So it's everything. So it's technology, it's security, it's finance. You've got guys moving from New York and San Francisco and Europe. It's and South America. It's an amazing melting pot of the smartest people. And I'll tell you a quick story. I had a dinner about a month ago. I had a bunch of really smart guys and wealthy guys from Austin, Texas in town. And I said, I want to introduce you guys to the cutting edge technology guys in Miami. And so I put a table together. We went to Cipriani. We had 16 people there. And the conversation, Carlton, your head would have fallen off. I mean, you would have fit in so well because and these kids, they're kids, you know, they're in their 20s and the early 30s, and they're having this conversation, and it just like one guy's from Bangladesh. His name's Ozzy. I mean, he's 24 years old. He's written a manifesto. I'm like, Ozzy, the only people who write manifestos are terrorists.
Part of my enough group.
All right, Krasinski, Ted Krasinski, whatever, you know, the Unabomber. I'm like, okay. And he goes, you know, but the conversation, and then we got like the two guys who run the biggest crypto hedge fund in the world sitting right there. They're in their 30s. Like the whole table is just the energy levels, the intelligence. It really blew me in. And again, I'm a short guy. So at the end of the night, I stood up and I said, you know, folks, just about everywhere I've ever been, at any dinner I've ever been to, I bring down the average height of everybody at the table. But this might be the first time I think I might be bringing down the average IQ. And that's but I'm telling you, man, they're transforming the energy levels. It reminds me of the mid 90s when we were all sitting around like, this internet thing is going to be big. This internet thing is going to be big. We didn't know how to monetize it or how to go get it. But you just know, and you can feel it. And again, it's global. At that table, guy from Sweden, guy from Austria, guy from Bangladesh, guy from Pakistan. You know, you've got this amazing melting pot of brains that's just on fire. And Miami's a fun place, of course, and it's great. But it's been impressive. And then a couple of days later, we're on the beach for the 4th of July weekend, and I'm having a little party. And the same kind of gang is there, and I'm holding court, just, you know, asking questions, having fun, and one of them looks at me and goes, "Hey, man, Ron, what's a recession like?" I'm like, "Thank you," because I'm the old dinosaur here. And I said to them, a recession. Let's put it this way: a bull market is like the game of poker. You get some cards, you look at them, you don't like them, you fold. As Silicon Valley famously says, fail fast. So you fold, and you wait for your shot, because opportunity cost in a bull market is your problem, right? It's just, you want to make sure you take the best shots you can, so don't waste time on a loser. Keep moving. A recession, a bull market, a bear market is like the game of chess. There is no luck. You're either good or you are not. And we were about to find out, because everybody exact same hand, and it's who can execute. And so I had a guy, I was telling that story to the guy who runs the company I was talking about earlier. Oh, by the way, the healthcare company that I said we invested in, they just borrowed $20 million against their data as an asset. So data back.
So it's being used then. So data as an asset is being. Yeah. And did you create that, or was that created elsewhere?
They created the data set. We did the valuation on it that was used to underwrite the loan. And that's what Silverback's about, really. At this stage, it's all about creating data assets. And so, I lost my train of thought on the bull market, bear market. Anyway,
you were saying that. Yes, sorry. Go ahead.
I'll come back around. I forgot what I was. I had a funny anecdote for you, but it slipped my mind. I know. No. So the CEO there, I'm telling him that story about the bulls and the bears, and he's my age, you know. And he's like, "That's funny." He said, "I would have said a recession is like divorce. It's painful and expensive." And I said, "Oh no, a recession's way worse than divorce, because I lose half my money and I still have my wife." And so, that's my cynical view. Please don't hold that against me, the world. but I am not married. I'm 2-0. I'm undefeated.
Top man. Yeah.
Anyway.
So see, the interesting thing is with this, you see, because these guys, crypto has lost tremendous amounts of money. What do these guys think, though? Do they see that as a loss of money, or do they see that as an opportunity to buy and come back through? What's the perspective?
Yeah, I would say I have a very good friend who used to be a big shot at Credit Suisse during the internet age, and he just is he's anti-crypto. He's like, it's worthless, it has no value. He's a super smart guy. Like, he makes a very compelling case. And then you got these young bucks like, yeah, the old people don't understand. I think most of them are true believers. I think if they didn't die in the correction, it's I think they really think it's the future, and I agree. There's some value to it, yeah. But it's almost a generational thing, at least from my perspective in Miami. Although there's a few folks running around Miami who are my age and older and are deep in it. I'm not a big crypto guy myself. I'm not investing in crypto. I may make an investment shortly in a crypto fund, one of those guys in Miami, but generally, I think the next generation truly believes that there's some transformative value in this, and they can explain.
Well, I think there is. I think there is, but I think it's a challenge to the present order, and that's the problem. And I just think the correction. I may be totally wrong, but I think the correction is the present order trying to obtain the leadership role, and once they do, I think you'll see crypto being big.
I tend to agree with your assessment. I have very smart friends who say that's not what's going to happen at all. But I agree with you. I think the powers that be, as soon as they can control or benefit from crypto as a global reality, then you'll see it accelerate. I'm that cynical, I think you're right. And we'll see. But it is interesting, and I don't know how the Federal Reserve. I don't understand how they think they can control it, but I'm sure they watch and they'll figure it out. And I do think it could be manipulated very easily because of the size of the market. And it's getting big enough where it's starting to sting, starting to matter to the powers that be. Mm-hmm. So I think if you were going to manipulate this to buy yourself some time to get control of it, the market's big enough to matter, but not so big that you can't control it yet. You can buy and sell shit. I mean, the Fed could buy and sell Bitcoin. They could buy up the market if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm with you.
That's exactly what I mean. You see, because if you don't do it now, you lose control of it. Yep. That's exactly what I mean. Yeah. So that's my feeling. I may be totally wrong, but my feeling was that if they don't control that now, because half the guys who wanted to push it forward were decentralists, weren't they? The whole idea was not to have government running this system. Sure. So we can control it, we can move it, we can move money around the world, they won't know, etc., etc., etc. Well, they always want to know. So the reality is that you've now got to get a handle on it, and I think they got a handle on it before it got too big. That's just my perspective. I may be totally wrong.
No, I think it's a perspective born of a lot of wisdom and experience on how the world really works, and I think I agree. I think again, when the Bitcoin market is $1 billion, nobody cares. When it's 700 billion, approaching a trillion. It's getting to be something that needs to be dealt with. Yeah. So, speaking of all that, and starting how we started the conversation, I have my birthday is on Halloween. So I always have this silly party called Ronoween, which I did not name myself. So I'm not that much of a narcissist. I had an admin once name it and it stuck. And people come in from all over the world, and it's a 5-day event. And we we call it a day of learning. And last year we did it in Tulum, Mexico, and we had some of the top Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto, data, asset valuation people from around the world came, and we all just sit around and rap, like what's going on. We have these little mini presentations, but it's very casual, and it's really fun. And I'd love to have you come this year. It's going to be in New Orleans this year. Last year was Tulum, Mexico, and next year I'm hoping to do it in Europe. Well,
I'd love to be there, my friend. I would love to be there.
You would be such a great addition to the mix, because the political insights that you bring. I mean, a lot of these tech guys are, they're very, optimistic and excited, and they believe so much in the ability of tech to transform the world. It reminds me of me in the 90s. We were sitting around. If you and I were sitting around in the 90s, I'd be like, Carlton, this internet thing is going to be big. And you'd say, yeah, how are we going to make money from it? I'm like, I don't know, but it's going to be big. And it's going to liberate the little guy. It's going to level the playing field. It's going to do all this wonderful libertarian shit. And, we end up with Google and Amazon. They have that it's so beautiful and so powerful, and they understand the power that they're unleashing on the world. Yeah. But I don't think they understand. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think there's a naivete that is almost necessary to be dumb enough to try this shit and and give it a go. So I just think you bring a lot to the table on that. So I'd love to have you, and let's talk offline. But I think you'd be great. We could even do a show from there. You could interview like 10 of the top crypto guys.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. 10 guys all together would be brilliant. Yeah.
You can host a panel on crypto geniuses, and we'll have my friend Ravi Surya, who's a genius and hates crypto. I shouldn't say hates crypto. He's very skeptical. And then you got the true believers. It'd be fun to see them going at it on a stage with you emceeing. It would be so much fun.
Fantastic. Yeah. Love to do it. Ron, we're unfortunately coming to our time. As per normal, we just talk, and next minute, an hour has just spun by before you've done anything. Yeah, but that's been absolutely fantastic. Listen, you will be back. Well, I can't say you will. I can't. You're a busy man, so I can't. I'm hoping you will grace us with your presence again sometime again in the future, because as you originally said, and as we said, the world is moving at such a pace. Can I just ask you one question, because this is one that's actually in my mind? What do you think of the removal of Russia from SWIFT? Because I thought that was a very dangerous thing, because I thought all the others who may think at some stage they get on the United States crosshairs thought, you know what, we better create something ourselves, because next minute it's us. I mean, what's your feeling on it?
No, I was surprised, and I agree with you. I think I understand, why the West and in the U.S. in particular wants to check Russian aggression. I get that, but I agree with you that you send the wrong message to even allies of the United States. That,
very true.
If you cross the United States and they have the power to do that to you, it can wreak havoc on your economy. And right now, it's probably unlikely the U.S. would do something to hurt France or Germany, but that doesn't speak to the future. Crazy things can happen on both sides of the pond. And if I were Germany or France or England or any country, I would certainly be figuring out ways to alleviate that risk over time. And I think it was a dangerous precedent to set. And a lot of big political decisions have unintended consequences. And I think this could be an example of that in the long run. So, you win the battle, lose the war. I couldn't agree with you more, and I think you probably have more insights than I do on how that's going to impact thinking in heads of state and in governments around the world. But I think you hit the nail on the head with it's a dangerous precedent that is going to have repercussions long term. Yeah. And maybe a flight to Bitcoin, and
absolutely, you're absolutely right. Yeah. It could be bit. It's. Yeah, well, I hate to stop you, my friend, but we're gonna have to.
Too much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have to close the show. But ladies and gentlemen, you've once again heard from that man, Ron Bienvenu. If you haven't, and I'm going to say it again, if you have not listened to the first one, you will hear how this man made his way forward. He is, the normal guy, so he can talk about Joe Soap, the normal guy. He can talk about how the normal guy makes it all the way to the top. Not many people can do that. So when he's saying that, there is a reality to what Ronnie's saying. So please do not discount it. Go back to the original part 1 with Ron Bienvenu, understand where he comes from, contextualize it now with this part 2, and you'll see where we were going. Ron, thank you very much again, my friend, because you're a very busy man, and thanks for your time.
Carlton, I enjoy it. This is the most fun I have every time I'm on the show. This is the most fun I have in the whole month. It's just great. So thank you for the opportunity and what you do. I think what you do is valuable to the world, and more people need to understand the kinds of things you talk about on a regular basis if we're going to drive this world forward in a fair and just way. So I appreciate what you do very much.
Thanks very much, man. Appreciate it,
man.
And
I'll see you in October.
See
you in New Orleans.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you again next week. Thanks for your time.
Carol. Okay, bye-bye.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
In the quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.